As if they didn't have enough in terms of a challenge already, traditional broadcasters will be fighting harder still for the advertising dollar once Netflix's ad-funded model hits Australia on November 4th and New Zealand sometime next year. Someone who's looked into this move and what it might mean for the local market is Rob Thomas, Spark Foundry New Zealand's Head of Digital and Data. And Rob joins me now. And Rob, what is this service?
So Netflix have obviously been in existence for over 10 years now. They've moved from being primarily a DVD shipping service, which is actually incredible to think of where they are today. And over time, what they've done is they've onboarded their content through a lot of licensing agreements with different entertainment brands, the likes of Disney and Warner Brothers and other broadcasters, even local, to form an online subscription on-demand service, which has certainly gone gangbusters over the last 10 years in particular. Where Netflix really started growing was when they made their own original content, so the likes of Stranger Things, for example, and shows like the Squid Game, which get very much integrated into culture, to the point now where they are one of the biggest tech brands in the world. What has happened over time is that there was a big boom in subscriber video services during COVID. So obviously people at home more, watching more content, and a little bit more disposable income for people who weren't travelling. Their number of subscriptions increased, and Netflix and Disney Plus and Amazon Prime and Neon locally all benefited greatly from that. The changes since then, though, with the cost of living crisis, has meant that the number of subscriptions that people have are decreasing. So the likes of Netflix are really suffering from that. So they had 2 quarters where they faced subscriber loss for the first time ever, and the share market for them and every video on demand platform subsequently was greatly impacted. So to overcome that, what they've done is one solution is to open up to advertisers, which is something they said they would never do, but needs must. And here we are today, where they're launching on the 4th of November in Australia and 11 other markets with their ad-funded model.
So let's put this in context of other video-on-demand services. Is Netflix first in this space, or how do they track with the others?
Yeah, so a couple of other companies have been trialling it. So Disney have been trialling an ad-funded model for Disney Plus over in the US, which they have seen as such success that they will be rolling that out globally. It's not something that's here or in any other market outside of the US yet, but it's expected either to be this quarter or the first quarter of next year. So it is something that has been trialled. It's a first for Netflix. You don't see ads on a lot of other video platforms at the moment. They tend to keep themselves as walled gardens where as long as you pay the subscription amount, you are kept free of advertising, but that balance is starting to shift.
So we're looking at what's happening in Australia and sort of trying to get some cues about what might happen here.
That's exactly right.
And the issue is, how many people are going to want a cheaper sub for ads?
That is the golden question, of which no one has the answer at the moment. I think that's why this will be such an interesting play, not just within advertising, but when you look at the businesses in that competitor landscape as well. So when you look at the TV networks, when you look at digital players like YouTube, obviously, who was such a big part of our ecosystem, the big question will be how many people and what is the appetite for taking a slightly reduced cost in subscription and offsetting that against ads. So at the moment, there are estimates that get touted around. It might be 10%, it might be 15% of what an existing base model looks like. I think the interesting part will be how many people who currently have Netflix downgrade to the more basic ad-funded model. But what Netflix will be looking at is the wider market. So they'll say, right, those who have maybe reduced their number of subscriptions over a period of time or have a cost barrier to entry from signing up to more video on demand platforms, how many of that new market can they convert to this basic ad funded model? Because when you look at a cost of $6.99 a month versus most of the other competitors who here are, I think Neon's $17.99, it's just increased its price to, for example, that's a big cost difference.
Yes.
You know, that could save someone $10 a month, which in this economy is a lot of money.
Is there a point, though, at which they're just cannibalising each other? I mean, there's only so much content to go around.
That's the biggest problem at the moment. So the average number of subscriptions per household is just over 3 globally at the moment. And you look at entertainment, that is one element of subscription. You think about news services, obviously, that have paywalls and subscriptions to it, like yourself as well. You look at fitness memberships with likes of Strava, that's a subscription. You've got Spotify and other audio, that's all subscriptions. So when you add all of those in together, entertainment's a big part of it. But actually, when you say there might be 3.5 subscriptions per household, that's not a lot for what's out there. And within content and entertainment, that becomes even less. So you think in New Zealand, there are global players like Netflix, you've got Amazon Prime Video, Disney Plus. Locally, you've got Neon. Sky is a subscription service, of course. You throw that in there as well. There is not enough to go around for everyone. So what we'll see over the next 2 and 3 years is a very, very interesting number of moves that happen in this market to see which stand out and which ones don't.
Yeah. Reading your paper, it comes through quite clearly that another big move is going to be Netflix having to reveal who is watching its platforms. And can you just explain a little bit about that?
Of course. So Netflix it has been a walled garden in the sense that they have not allowed public information around their user base and their viewership. The reason being is they've always spoken freely about protecting the consumer. That's why they haven't had advertising on their platform as well. They want it to be a platform that's built for their user base and their significantly large user base, and that's worked for them. Over time, when you start thinking about moving into an ad-funded model, that information really needs to become public to be able to generate the trust of advertisers and brands. Because what we would not do is we wouldn't invest money into somewhere where we don't know how many people we're reaching, what demographic they are, how long they spend on that platform. So it's not coincidental, in my opinion, that this measurement has come together when they're moving to their ad-funded model, but they have reached agreements in the UK with the trade measurement partner called Barb. They're working with Nielsen in the US, who obviously are a very big third-party measurement provider, and I imagine that's who they would use in this market when they come here. And they published their September numbers along with all of the other broadcasts in the UK a couple of weeks ago. And Netflix came out very, very strongly. Their reach is incredibly high. They're behind the free-to-air networks, but they would be because it's subscriber-funded. You have to pay for it. But they still reach 68% of the population. The amount of time that people are spending on Netflix is around 28 minutes per day, which is second only to the BBC. And you think BBC, they've got the likes of news, they've got a lot of content, they've got the likes of EastEnders, which is something very close to my heart, I know. So actually, when you add those numbers up, it's a really, really strong proposition, and it just shows the scale that they have in the UK, and that will no doubt extrapolate globally as well. The question will be, to your earlier question, how much can you scale of that reach into an ad-funded membership?
Is there a demand from advertisers to be on Netflix?
An incredible amount of demand.
Even in New Zealand?
Yes. So since I wrote that paper, I've probably spoken... I've had 4 or 5 clients separately speak to me just about what's happening and when they can be involved. There are some who want to dive straight in at the deep end and be first to market when they're launched. There are others who want to see how it plays out in Australia and see where it works for them. But the appetite and the interest is amazing. I think there's 2 reasons for that. Number one is the position of Netflix within culture. I think people want to associate with that. You know, at Spark Foundry, we talk a lot about something called cultural fluency, which is how brands can integrate themselves into the way that culture's moving to become, to develop a close affinity with their consumers. Netflix is a very good way of doing that because it stems so much cultural conversation around the content that they release. The second big reason is the demographic that subscribes to that platform, which generally speaking is the younger, harder to get end of the demographic spectrum. You'd be looking at generally people from between 16 and 39. Those audiences are moving away from linear television and become more and more expensive to target, more and more expensive to find, and they're moving into these walled gardens like Netflix. So for advertisers, when they see a platform who has such a close affiliation with that demographic, and the price is going to be relatively similar to what they would pay on TV, that becomes a really, really interesting portfolio for them to look at to say, right, I've got a product that I need to target 18 to 24s at. Netflix becomes the perfect type of place to do that.